President Donald Trump took what some people may see as an unexpected pivot on Thursday morning when he posted on Truth Social. Our great farmers and people in the hotel and leisure business have been stating that our very aggressive policy on immigration is taking very good, longtime workers away from them, with those jobs being almost impossible to replace. In many cases, the criminals allowed into our country by the very stupid Biden open borders policy are applying for those jobs. This is not good. We must protect our farmers, get the criminals out of the USA. Changes are coming. Now, Peter Doocy asked Donald Trump during a press conference to expound upon that post on Truth Social a little bit later, just a couple of hours later on Thursday at the White House. Let's take a listen.
Peter?
Thank you, President Trump. I have two. First, on immigration. What made you change your mind about targeting in California farmers and people in the hotel and leisure business?
Well, we're not targeting. In fact, if you look today, I put out a statement today about farmers. Our farmers are being hurt badly by, they have very good workers. They've worked for them for 20 years. They're not citizens, but they've turned out to be, great. And we're going to have to do something about that. We can't take farmers and take all their people and send them back because they don't have maybe what they're supposed to have, maybe not. And you know what's going to happen and what is happening? They get rid of some of the people because, you go into a farm and you look and people they've been there for 20, 25 years and they've worked great and the owner of the farm loves them and everything else. And then you're supposed to throw them out. And you know what happens? They end up hiring the people, the criminals that have come in, the murderers from prisons and everything else. So we're going to have an order on that pretty soon, I think. We can't do that to our farmers. And leisure, too, hotels. We're going to have to use a lot of common sense on that.
So again, Trump says you go into a farm and you look at people that have been there for 20 to 25 years and work great, and the owner of the farm loves them, and you're supposed to throw them out. We can't do that to our farmers and leisure, to hotels. We'll have to use common sense on that. Watch this video of ICE agents actually chasing workers in a field in Ventura County. This is from this week. I'm actually going to read from an ABC7 report on this that's local to Los Angeles. Immigration and Customs Enforcement targeted workers on produce farms in Ventura County Tuesday morning in one of the latest raids in Southern California. The raids come as the federal government ramps up immigration enforcement in Southern California. Farm workers told Eyewitness News that ICE agents arrived at an Oxnard farm around 6 a.m. on Tuesday. We saw a car where we were on the side. The car was coming and ICE was following the car, said one of the workers who asked to remain anonymous. Video posted online showed ICE agents chasing after some of the workers as they fled the fields. Okay, so pausing on that for just a moment. The Wall Street Journal reported a lot of this started to increase after Stephen Miller, obviously a very senior level advisor to Donald Trump, particularly on immigration issues, always has been since 2015 and 2016. And Stephen Miller, reportedly, according to the Wall Street Journal, hosted a briefing where he was basically telling Homeland Security officials, start targeting Home Depots, start targeting the areas outside of 7-Elevens. And then, not long afterwards, just within the last couple of weeks, that seems to be what's happening, that ICE actually is going to some of these places of business and apprehending people. And, Trump then coming out, making these statements, is basically directly, he's directly, I mean, it's true. He's basically here directly contradicting. I was trying to determine whether or not that was a strong enough word, but he is. He's directly contradicting the argument that his closest allies, including Stephen Miller, have made for a very long time, which is that there are plenty of Americans who will do these jobs. The Trump quote, again, exactly, is that those jobs are almost impossible to replace. And Trump then says the criminals brought in by the very stupid Biden open borders policy are applying for those jobs. That is directly counter to the argument people like Stephen Miller and other immigration hardliners on the right, including myself, by the way, have made for a really long time, that there are American workers. You need to have incentives, obviously, for those jobs to go to American workers, but that basically if there is a change in the undocumented workforce of people who are very, very often exploited by these business owners, that if there's a change in it, eventually wages go up for American workers and those workers take those jobs. Because right now, the reason American workers don't take those jobs is that they pay ridiculously low. In some cases, you could live better without doing back-breaking work off of disability or other benefits or by gig work here and there. That's how poorly some of these jobs pay. So that Trump is siding with the enemy in this case, the political enemy, the economic enemy, the class enemy of his own closest allies, the people who are the intellectual architects of his immigration policy. I mean, that's exactly what's happening here. Donald Trump is saying, I'm hearing from basically wealthy business owners. He says farmers. In this case, that's I mean, it's doing a lot of work. It's farmers. There are some small local farmers that likely benefit from this, but a lot of this is also very wealthy, big ag types who are probably upset about potentially their labor costs going up and having short-term squeeze, which would hit consumers too. I mean, there's no question about that. And there do have to be incentives for Americans to go back into these jobs. And there probably should be some level, and this is where I would disagree with Stephen Miller, but there probably should be some level of immigration with protections against exploitation. But this, I mean, I can't even overemphasize how important it is that Trump right now is contradicting months and months, years and years of his closest allies who say that anyone who talks like this is basically a shill for big business and open borders. And again, like I sort of tend to agree with that. I mean, I think that's why we've never had substantive changes in immigration policy, is that this easily exploitable source of labor of people who have much worse lives in other countries, who, even though it sucks to be poor in the United States, are much happier if they're poor here than poor and destitute elsewhere, and more violent and more difficult parts of Latin America, for example, that they're willing to come and be exploited and live in the shadows of American society for years just with the hope of becoming a citizen. So, no, I mean, I don't think that's good for anybody. For example, Los Angeles is estimated, and this is before the Biden-era migration wave, was estimated to have 900,000 undocumented immigrants. That's according to USA Today, looking at a 2020 study. So imagine how that's exploded since the Biden-era immigration wave, in which about 8 million overall, according to the New York Times at least, it's a very hard number to put your finger on, came into the United States as a net. So net 8 million. The numbers of everyone who came in are a little bit different than that because some people left, and that includes some people who crossed multiple times. So I think David Leonhardt's number is pretty good on that one for the New York Times, but 8 million people. So imagine it's probably at least 1 million undocumented immigrant members of the LA population. That's just the city of LA, according to this study at least. Does anybody think that it is good for Los Angeles to have a population? Let's say you are pro-open borders or anti-open borders. Do either of those sides agree that it is good for the city of Los Angeles to have 1 million people living in the shadows of society with no certainty as to whether they can ever end up becoming a permanent resident or a citizen, as to how they will make money? Can they save up money? Can they go to the doctor? What happens if they get into a fender bender? Do they worry about deportation? Do they worry, let's say in the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, there was a domestic violence accusation that was made and then revoked, which is something that does happen with people who are in the country illegally. He had a pending, well, actually I shouldn't say, because it was his immigration case has been interesting, and it's sort of pinged back and forth through the court system. I don't know when that was made. I believe when it was made, he had a pending asylum case. I would have to double check that. But that would mean he wasn't in the country illegally, quote unquote, even though he had crossed illegally. He had made an asylum claim many years later. But people will revoke it because they're afraid of someone, maybe their husband, being deported, or maybe themselves being deported. So you now have 1 million people living with that precarity in the city of Los Angeles. That's just an estimate, and that is just the city of Los Angeles. What do you do? 1 million people, legally precarious situations, uncertain futures, and you either give all of those people permanent status, you give all of those people citizenship, and that's what the open borders people would say. Absolutely, we should do that. We must do that. It's in everyone's best interest. People can have peace of mind and live more safely and more happily. But then what happens is you get a million more and a million more, because as long as you can cross the border, you can become, you then have that magnet policy. And this is why people who are immigration hawks don't trust that option, because when does it stop? When does it stop? What's the limiting principle there? Everyone will always say it's just for the people who are here now, and then we seal the borders. Well, the Trump administration actually really has stopped crossings, so it can be done. But this is only 6 months in, and it could also, whether a Democratic president or any other president would be actually able to continue doing that. I mean, the Trump administration policies have been criticized by Democrats, so it's unlikely to say that they would keep all of those policies in place, in which case, as soon as you have leniency at the border and you have a magnet policy that's bringing people in because they have a shot at legality and they're desperate. They don't want to continue living wherever they came from before. I've talked about this story many times. When I was speaking with some Haitian migrants in northern Mexico back in 2021, I think it was, they had come from Argentina and Chile and Brazil, where they had moved after the earthquake in 2010. And they had pretty decent lives. They would have say it. They had pretty decent lives in those places, like pretty decent. They were able to make a living. They felt reasonably safe, but they had been sleeping in the streets in Reynosa, in cartel country, for months and months and months. And we were trying to ask them, like, why sleep on the streets in a dangerous area when you were making money and having safety, personal safety, some measure of prosperity in different parts. Why try to come to America? Why is that worth it? And we were having, some translation issues. And eventually I just said, the American dream. I basically asked them, the American dream. They all lit up and said, yes, that, which is sort of romantic and poetic. But I think the point remains that basically people can just have better lives. They know that they can have better lives in America than they can have being middle class, or even like lower middle class, working poor in another place in Central America, Latin America, South America. And so there's always going to be, until that's changed, what Kamala Harris would refer to as the root causes of migration. Until that's changed, then you just have a constant pull factor by the U.S. being a better place to live. So then what do you do? What do you do? It's an impossible situation. Anybody who's acting like that's easy on either side is insane. So let's look at this chart to get to what Donald Trump was talking about on where undocumented immigrants work. This is from the American Immigration Council and its analysis of 2022 numbers. So again, these numbers are probably higher where it says total number of undocumented workers since the rest of the Biden wave. That's about halfway into the Biden wave, a little further than halfway. But so it shows about 13.7%, so about 14% are working in construction, agriculture, hospitality. So you see agriculture and hospitality, those two are the ones that Donald Trump is talking about. Those are 13%, 7%, and construction, again, is around 14%. So again, that just proves the point. Trump is making exactly the argument that his allies have pitted him against. They've said this is not what Donald Trump will stand for, which is the kind of upper middle class and upper class of America, hurting American workers to exploit a foreign labor force that lives in precarious conditions and creates a culture that is not good for anyone, because there's fear, there's living in the shadows, hiding from the law, even on just small little basic things. Not voting, or taxes get complicated in all of that, contributing in the same way as the average citizen. You can't find anybody that thinks that's actually good. And among the people who aren't full open borders, which is most of the country, basically everyone agrees there has to be some deportations. And what Trump is saying is that those deportations should just be of criminals. And that's, again, very, very different. The Trump administration did promise to go after criminals first, but it did not promise not to go after regular people at all, regular migrants, non-criminal migrants at all. So let's find some of those numbers of the criminal population. These numbers are actually shocking, and I remember them going pretty viral when they came out about a year ago now. This is numbers from Homeland Security, from ICE, that were given to Congressman last year, Tony Gonzalez, who asked for numbers on the national docket for non-citizens by criminality and the most serious charge category as of July 21, 2024. These numbers, shocking. Like I said, if you look at people who are not detained, 14,000 are convicted of burglary. Then you go down, let's see, dangerous drugs, 56,000 non-detained. Keep going down here. Homicide, 13,000. 13,000. Larceny, 18,000. Robbery, 10,000. Sexual assault, about 16,000. Not detained. And then if you go into things that are less serious, like traffic offenses, 77,000, weapons offenses, 13,000. I mean, if you are someone who's victimized by a non-detained, non-citizen who was a convicted criminal, your blood should boil. You'll go through the roof. That's why stories like the one of Lake and Riley send people through the roof, because it's not just an isolated incident. It is cautionary, and it's a tragedy that should, out of respect for the victim, serve as a cautionary example, and hopefully it can spare other people the same fate. But when we look at these numbers and realize that we have sympathy for people who are blocking ICE enforcement, I mean, yes, I think the Trump administration should go about deportations of criminals and ICE enforcement in a way that is fully legal and constitutional, and I think people should criticize them when they don't. Absolutely, no question about it. On the other hand, there would be protests even if the Trump administration was doing all of that flawlessly and to a T. There would be unrest, there would be protests, and so long as that's the case, it means you have either a wide swath of the country completely ignorant of how bad this situation is. 62,000 convicted criminals of assault are not detained in this country. I mean, it's completely insane. And what are Democrats' plans to handle that? What's the left's plan? People who are protesting deportations plans to handle that? Again, I don't think the Trump administration is beyond criticism. I think they should be criticized when they go outside the bounds of what's constitutional, legal, and humane. Absolutely, of course. But the people who are criticizing that don't seem to be aware of the severity of the problem or don't care. And neither of those things is good. And so we're left with a situation that feels completely untenable. It's the same thing with having now nearly 1 million, probably more than 1 million, undocumented people, illegal people in the people whose citizenship, who are non-citizens, who are in the country illegally, living in a city like Los Angeles. You can rinse and repeat that in cities around the country. And so then you also have Donald Trump saying, well, maybe we do need this exploitable shadow society to continue toiling in this backbreaking labor for meager amounts of cash under the table, just because it's better than you being in Argentina or wherever else by their calculus, because I'm hearing from business owners. I mean, these are strange times. Trump is also saying that his China deal seems to conflict with his own State Department's policy on visas for Chinese students. So a lot of this is up in flux right now as Trump is negotiating many such cases, as he would say. That does happen. It's not crazy that some of this stuff shifts. So Trump posted, "We'll provide to China what was agreed to, including Chinese students using our colleges and universities," which has always been good with me. So yes, I mean, he's in the middle of negotiations on this, but it was really something to see his immigration trajectory play out today, where he said he was hearing from the very types of business leaders who his allies, like Stephen Miller, have criticized as, in some ways, the central villains of immigration policy in the United States. All right. On that note, thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to a premium version of the show over at undercurrents.tv. Subscribe on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts as well, and we'll be back here soon with more.